I really like taking ideas that are maybe seemingly incompatible and sort of mixing them together. And I think it's fascinating how uncomfortable it makes people. You know, if you're interested in Christian values and then you're also an admirer of the teachings of Wicca or Buddhism or something like that, if you're a proponent of liberal ideas and conservative ideas all at the same time, people just hate it because it makes them feel like they're vulnerable, I guess. People want to be able to say that they own a certain idea, it's their idea, and it's their truth. And anyone who doesn't see things exactly the way they do doesn't have a right to a claim on their moral superiority, I guess. In any case, today we're talking about Satanism and an interesting idea I got. See, I was raised Christian, so I had this idea always about how Satan was like this evil dude that was all covered in fire and flames, like a horned goat or something like that, right? Like something out of Diablo or something. And so I had this belief that people who worship Satan are just kind of the traditional picture of you know, devil worshippers. You know, we all see them. We see the pictures of it in popular culture, what this is supposed to look like. And then I thought it was interesting eventually to learn and realize that actual Satanists are not really people who believe in the big demonic horned goat guy and they bow down and worship him exactly. Like, they're not really about that. Usually they are more like a brand of atheism. In my experience, and I haven't immersed myself in this, but from what I've observed, people who identify as Satanists are usually all about celebrating the concept of selfishness as the supreme purpose of man, basically. They're worshipers of themselves. And anything that tends to venerate the concept of placing something other than yourself at the top of the pyramid, whether that be deity, a god, a moral virtue, a social virtue, whatever it is, none of those things in the concept of the Satanist ethos should be given priority over the concept of self. And so it's this supreme notion of selfishness, of being in control. And maybe I'm oversimplifying this. I wouldn't doubt that I am, but I think in a nutshell, I'm right. And then I got to thinking about how that notion is really, really kind of the opposite of what Wiccan teachings are. Wicca is usually a lot more about the concept of spiritualism without religious context, the notion that you can do whatever you want, but you should never do harm, and the concept of being in harmony with nature and with the earth and with I guess, the supreme order of all things. So you kind of have these two concepts, and I guess both of them are variants of that notion of valuing yourself and thinking for yourself and not being defined by someone else's dogma. But Wiccan teachings definitely believe that we should respect others, and we should believe that we are part of something greater than ourselves. Whereas Satanism believes that we should view ourselves as the highest supreme. Now, I and most people don't really officially identify with either of those outlooks, but I think there's something you can learn from both of them. And what I was thinking about this evening is how interesting it is that there's people who identify as conservative Christians who actually live in a way that's far more aligned with a Luciferian Satanist perspective than they realize. Because there's a lot of people who have the belief of empowerment and control. So, for example, it's the idea of, I will empower you to have a better quality of life if you work for me and do what I say. Or I will ensure that you have love and safety in your life if you are obedient to my orders in our home or in our household. If you do what I say, you're not going to have any problems. In fact, life is going to be better than it's ever been or could ever be without me. But you have to give me what I want. It could be the desire to evangelize people. It's that idea of, we can be part of a greater good, but you have to first believe in what I believe. You have to align with my agenda, and if you don't, then you are a problem, and we aren't on the same team. But if you do what I say, if you are willing to surrender your autonomy to my control, then I will empower you. It's kind of the God complex. It's that idea of wanting to basically play God, not just with your life, but with the lives of those around you. And there's a lot of people who do that. There is a Bible verse where Jesus says that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. And I really think that that resonates a lot because it's so true. People who want control and people who want to help others, but only so that they can exert and validate their own sense of dominance, those people are toxic. And in my experience, no matter how much those people try to do the right thing, they always wind up doing it for the wrong reasons. And if you're trying to empower others just so that you can have more control, that's not love. That's not service. It's not genuine. And in the end, it can only lead to a bad end. And it doesn't really matter whether you are professing to be a Christian, whether you're claiming to be an enlightened person, or if you are just totally in it for yourself as some sort of a mercenary. If you don't foundationally believe that you're part of something greater than yourself, and if you don't believe that it's worth it to empower other people without expecting any personal return, if you don't want anyone to get ahead unless you're the one who gets the credit, it doesn't matter what your official ethos is. It doesn't matter what your alignment is, what your religion is, or your absence of religion. You're basically, if that's you, you're basically a Satanist, because you don't believe that you're part of something greater than yourself. You don't want to empower other people. You don't want to create harmony. You want to make everything about you. And as we go through life, I think we see this a lot. And there's many times where you might feel like something is not bad, and yet it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. And if you really deep dive into it, it's usually traceable back to this notion of people trying to empower in exchange for control. And that always feels bad for the person who's on the receiving end of it. Nobody wants to feel like they are trading their dignity, their autonomy, their right to self-respect in exchange for some kind of gains which someone is giving to them. Nobody wants to be turned into a pet that's just eating scraps that fall from the table. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that wind up being seemingly good in our lives have this shadow behind them, because the truth is we wind up making deals with the devil in the form of people who want to control us. And they always start off with some sort of a offer that seems like it's too good to pass up. It's like when you go to the cell phone place and they say, okay, you can have a brand new phone and you don't have to pay for it. Well, yeah, you have to pay for it. You're going to pay for it for the next year. And you might not pay anything today because the person who's selling it to you knows how to sell, but ultimately you are going to pay for it because nothing's really free. And we know this when we get an offer that seems too good to be true, but we know that it's not really coming from the right place. It could be a relationship that offers a certain degree of security or the promise of love, but it also feels hollow because the person who should be loving is actually controlling. It could be a family situation where maybe a parent says to their kid or something like that, or maybe their spouse even, you know, I love you, but then you have to do all these things and follow my rules and I'm in charge. And then after a while, all of the effort to control, to force someone to be the right kind of a person just pushes them away. And after a while, you have kids that hate their parents because their parents don't want them to follow their path or find their way or think for themselves. They just want to control them. And it's never fun. Doesn't even matter if it's the right message. If you spend your entire life having someone try to control you, at some point it's only natural you're going to want to rebel. And part of that is maybe just not right. We should be willing to take a message and apply it if it's a good message. But it's also true that if you're trying to control people and you don't want to listen, then you're going to push people away with all of your efforts to perhaps draw them closer. So the question is, what kind of motive do we have when we try to invest in the lives of others? You know, I think an interesting thought experiment maybe would be, what is more valuable to you? To inspire someone or to be a leader of someone. If you could make someone feel better about themselves, if you could make someone feel more of a sense of joy, if you could make someone feel more heard or loved or cared about or more valued, if you can make someone feel better about themselves, would you want to do that? Or would you rather be like the general with a whole lot of people that follow you, that take orders from you? Do you want to be in control? Do you want to be leading the charge and forcing people to fall in line? Or would you rather to just make someone's life better, make someone's day better? And if you're the kind of person who feels like having a power trip would be more appealing than having a life that's filled with a more gentle path of love and empowerment of others, and the celebration of freedom and diversity of opinions, then maybe you should do some soul searching and question, how can you work on yourself so that you're a little bit less of a toxic person? And otherwise, maybe the question is, what kind of toxic people do we allow into our lives? Do we allow people to take center stage in our life who ultimately are obsessed with controlling us? And if we do, then at some point it's important to break away. It's important to say, okay, I'm going to draw some lines and set some boundaries, and I'm not going to allow someone else's desire to play God dictate my own sense of self-worth. I'm not going to go worship another person and surrender my own right and ability to think for myself along the way. And that's hard because there's always that feeling of, if I give up these things, even if they are toxic, even if it's a controlling relationship, even if it's a tree that doesn't bear fruit, I'm going to hang out a little longer. I'm going to hope that it's going to be better one day. And it never is, until you say, okay, I'm going to be done. I'm not going to let toxic people use me as a commodity of trade. And you always know the fruit that is borne by a tree. Going back to another Jesus quote, Jesus once said, a fig tree doesn't bear grapes. And if a tree is barren, cut it down. In other words, just things are what they appear. If somebody acts like they don't care, you know what the truth is? They don't. I mean, I hate to say that, but if you feel like somebody's controlling, they probably are. If you feel like somebody doesn't really have your best interest at heart, they probably don't. If you feel like someone is doing hurtful things to you, they probably are not ignorant of this. Because if you really care, if you really have values of respect, and you really cherish the autonomy and the sanctity of other people's opinions and the right of others to find their own path, that bears fruit that's undeniable. You will know it. You always know it when you're in the presence of company that empowers you, that makes you feel good about life. And, we also know when we're doing the wrong thing by others too. And the truth is, we're all a little bit guilty of doing evil to others, I would say. Maybe not intentionally, but still, just because we have corrupt ideas. And then when we are maybe not looking at life through the right lens, we wind up harming others without intending to. And we also wind up harming ourselves because we allow the toxic behaviors of people in our lives to define the paths that we take. Sometimes we have to learn to let go of bad attitudes we have. Sometimes we have to learn to let go of other people who have those attitudes. And both are important. To be humble enough, self-reflective enough to know sometimes I'm out of line. And to also know that even if people usually mean well, sometimes they don't do the right things. And it's been said, you can have room for people in your heart and not allow them to be in your life. You can love people, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you can be close enough to them to allow them to do you harm. So always make room in your life for things that bear good fruit. And always ask the question of whether the things that you're doing, the things that you're thinking, the attitudes that you have toward yourself and toward others, ask if those are things which are likely to bear good fruit in your life and in the lives of others. And if you can't be certain of that, then always be open to reconsider. Because no matter what philosophy you adopt or align with, any extreme is probably not good. And we live in a world filled with selfishness. It's easy to be selfish in a materialistic world. We don't really feel like we're dependent on other people. We don't really have to do right by others because at the end of the day, we feel like it's okay. It's all right to delete people when we don't feel like having them on our social media anymore. Like, we view people as disposable. On some level, we view ourselves as disposable. Maybe sometimes other people do us harm, and then we start to have this attitude that, well, if no one cares for me, then I won't care for anybody. And that's not the right attitude either. Because eventually there's going to be someone else who's maybe not as jaded as you are. And hurt people hurt people. So if you want to do right in the world, you've got to stop saying just because other people are perhaps evil, I'm going to be evil too. Other people don't treat me right, so I'm not going to give anyone else the time of day either. You know, we have those attitudes sometimes. I'm just going to pass it on, right? If I have to be on the receiving end of misery, then I guess I'm going to bring down everyone else with me. We have that attitude. And then we become part of the problem. So, always remember, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. Till next time, good luck on your adventure. Try to stay positive, stay happy, and do good in the world, a little bit at a time. Remember, you can't help others if you don't first work on yourself. Thanks for watching.